Greetings, students. This video tutorial will assist you with finale number 4, The Washington Post March by John Philip Sousa. So for this assignment, we are not going to use a template. Instead, we're going to go straight into our setup wizard. With a setup wizard, you can create a new ensemble. So that's already selected. Go ahead and click Next. Now, when creating a new ensemble, you access the instruments via the instrument families. So over here, we'll go ahead and click on woodwinds. So just put in the instruments that I tell you to. Don't worry what's in the score. It's going to be a little bit different. We're going to start with having one piccolo part. So just double click and it pops up there. We have 2 flute parts. So we'll double click that twice. We have 2 oboe parts, and these will put these parts on different lines, on separate staffs. It's different in the score I've provided for you. That's okay. Just do as I tell you to. Next is 1 E-flat clarinet. Then we have 3 B-flat clarinet parts, an alto clarinet, and then a bass clarinet. We have first and second bassoon, and then we move down into the saxophones. You can see that it just placed that saxophone above the bassoons, but that's not the score order we want. So using the arrows, we're going to move that alto saxophone down, and now we'll add the second alto saxophone, 1 tenor, and 1 bari sax. We are now done with woodwinds and we're ready to move on to brass. In this particular score, we're going to use cornets and we're going to add 3 cornet parts. In the score I provided, it asks for 2 F horns and 2 E-flat horns. Don't worry about those E-flat horns. We're just going to add 4 horn and F parts. We're going to add 2 tenor trombones, and that third trombone is typically a bass trombone. It's a baritone for our next instrument, and you'll notice that finale gives you baritone BC, bass clef, and baritone TC, treble clef. We want to use treble clef. Just for your information, a baritone is essentially a smaller euphonium. In this score, it has next basses. That's really referring to tuba. And then we go into our drums. That first one is actually a snare drum, which is right there under drums, snare drum, add that. And then bass drum and cymbals. The bass drum single line is right here. You could add an additional cymbal line. That's going to be in percussion, their cymbals. But we're not going to do that. I'm going to show you how just to add the word cymbal to the staff definition, and then it'll look the same way that the score has given it to you. Okay, go ahead and click on Next. Our title is Washington Post March. Don't worry about subtitle. Composer is John Philip Sousa. Stay in the composer box. That's always my recommendation. Transcribed by you. No arranger, no lyricist. That copyright symbol, even if we get rid of it here, it's still going to pop up in the score. We'll get rid of it inside the score. Click on Next. We are in 6/8 time. When you look at the score, the first line is a piccolo in D flat. That's not an instrument that's in concert key, so don't get tricked. Move down to first flute. That instrument is in concert key. Therefore, we are in F major. You are only doing the first 7 measures. Always, always, always specify initial tempo marking. This is a march. A standard march is 120 beats per minute, but make sure you change your duration to a dotted quarter note because we are in 6/8 time. There is no pickup. If there were, we'd want to check that box. Click Finish. It takes a second. It's generating a large score. So don't get nervous if it doesn't pop up right away. And there's our score. As always, use your selection tool to get rid of the items you don't want. That little copyright symbol, that can go away. The arranger can go away. And the subtitle can go away. We never want to get rid of the word score. That's attached to every part, and that's what labels the part. So you want to keep that score. Okay, so a few things to get you going. First is that you always want to save your work, and you can set up autosave in Finale. If you click on Edit, Preferences, Save, make sure you have autosave selected, and then you can change how often you want it to autosave. It can be anything you want. Let's say 10 minutes. Make sure you apply that change and then click OK. The other thing you'll want to go ahead and set up right now, just so that it's done, you don't have to worry about it again, is multi-measure rests. You don't ever want to put multi-measure rests in your score, but you do want to put it in all your parts. So I'm just going to click check all and unselect score. And so then when you extract the parts, it'll already be done in there and you won't have to deal with it again. And click OK. This is also a good time to make sure that you have all the tools up that you want. If you don't see them, go ahead, right click on the light gray area and attach those palettes. The other item you want to make sure is set up, especially if you're realizing that sometimes your special tools palette might be disappearing after you use it. You can get rid of that by, again, clicking on Edit, Preferences, Palettes, and Backgrounds. You might have checked Close Subsidiary Palettes, and that's why some of your tools might be going away when you're done using them. Uncheck that. You don't want Finale to close those subsidiary palettes. Okay, so make sure that's not checked, and that'll make sure that all your palettes remain locked to your workspace. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put in one whole line of both notes, articulation, and dynamics. And then we're going to take that entire line and copy and paste it into all the parts. So go ahead right now and make sure when you're looking at the score, don't take that piccolo and D flat part, take the first flute or piccolo part, and you're going to go ahead and put that into flute 1. Whenever you're inputting notes into a project, copy and paste as much as you can. You can always easily change octaves. So I can already see that these first two measures are going to repeat. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that first measure, Shift and click the second measure, Control C will copy it, and Control V will paste it. And I've already saved some time. So I have my notes in. Now I will go ahead and put in the dynamic. Again, because we're working a large score, make sure that arrow is pointing to the correct part when you input it. And then articulation, we have some ties. I'm lazy, so I always just use slurs rather than ties. I think it's way faster, but that's completely my opinion. If you want to use ties, they're right down here. That's your tie tool. You have to make sure you affix it. You put it on for the first note in the tie, and then it'll tie to the following note, and then you have to turn it off again. And then the last thing we need to do is add that final articulation tool. Make sure it's pointing to the correct note. Double click, and the articulation is number 5. There we go. Okay, so now we've put everything in. Now, if you look at the last notes in the different parts, some are a marcato marking, and some are staccato, and some are just accented. Just stick with one. Don't worry that it's different, okay? Our goal for this is to use tools, not be totally exacting in our score work. Okay, so the next part is really fun and easy. We're going to go ahead and select that entire line of music you've put in. And in this case, I already know I need to change my octave, so I'm going to do that right now. Remember that 8 and 9 will raise and lower that octave. Okay, so I've changed that octave. I'm going to copy everything, Control-C, copy. And then we're just going to start pasting it into the score with Control-V. Now, double check your octaves as you do this. So the piccolo needs to match the flute, so that needs to go up an octave. Then flute 2, it needs to be down the octave. So we're going to push 8. Oboe 1 and oboe 2. That's exactly where it needs to be, so we don't have to worry about that. So go ahead and work your way down the score, just double checking your octaves. The nice thing about this tool is that as you go into transposing instruments, when you copy, it will automatically transpose. So here we are, clarinet in E flat. We're gonna paste it, and we need to change the octave, but it's already done that transposition for us. We go to clarinet in B flat, the transposition's done. All we need to do is change that octave. So now go ahead and do that to all of your wind and brass parts. The only thing you're checking is just the octave. When you look at the score, you'll see that your third cornet part has the part in octaves. Don't worry about that. Just pick an octave. It doesn't matter. That's not the goal of this assignment. So go ahead and pause the video and do that now. At this point, you should have successfully copied and pasted and adjusted octaves for all of your wind and brass parts. So you should have something that essentially looks like this. The next thing we need to do is our percussion parts. Now, when you look at the score, you'll see you have drums on one line and you have cymbals and bass drum on the second line. Really easy. We're going to just select that bass drum, give it a right click. We're going to edit that full staff name, and you can just put cymbals on top. And now you've got cymbals and bass drum. For the ease of this assignment, and because our goals are not perfect transcription here, go ahead and put in the rhythm of the snare drum. When you do this at this point, I'm going to tell you not to worry about the grace note, and we'll talk about those little markings on the eighth notes. Those are drum rolls, and we'll get to that tool. But right now, just put in the basic rhythm, and then we'll copy and paste that down into the cymbals and bass drum. Again, it's not what's actually in the score, but we're just working with different goals for this assignment. So go ahead and put that in now. As you do this, you probably will notice that as you move your mouse around the percussion staff, you will get little indications for different instruments. Let me put this in, I'll show you. As you move it around, you can see different instruments come up. Don't worry about that. We're just going to put it right on the line, and we've already assigned the name of that line. It doesn't matter that it could be snare drum or snare roll, many different things. Just go ahead and place that right on the line. And so continue doing that. Again, copy, paste as much as you can. So these first two measures, they can be selected. So select the first measure, shift, select the second measure, control copy, control V, and paste those. Great. Now we'll go ahead and add in the ties or the slurs I use slurs. You're welcome to use the tie. And you can see I made a mistake right here. It should have been a dotted half. For me to change that rhythm, I actually have to get rid of those rests, then select the dotted half, get that right on there, and that'll change it. Use your selection tool, select that, Control Copy, Control V. There we go. Going back to the slur, which will function as a tie. There we go. Okay. Okay. And now we will select that whole line, Control Copy. At this point, now go ahead and go back and add in the grace notes. Remember, you're going to select grace note and then the duration of the grace note. And now we're going to add that roll. And the roll is an articulation. You'll find that in your articulation tool. Select that. Select the note you want to attach it to, double click. As you look through this articulation tool, there are many different things you can use here. So far, we've used the basic articulations and fermatas. As you look here, though, you'll see trills and turns. And then finally, we've got piano pedaling. And then we have these right here. In addition to these being rolls used for percussion, they are also used for string tremolo. There's also breath marks. There's many different things. And so just be aware for future use that there are a lot of things in the articulation tool for you to use. We're selecting the double slash right there, and we're going to apply that to both of these eighth notes. Remember, you have to scroll down to get to it. Okay, so at this point, you should be done with all of your input. So the next part is to finalize this. And so, just as you have done in previous finale assignments, File, Extract Parts. Go ahead and, I select everything. I always include the score as well. And then click OK. And it takes a second because it's generating all these parts. It's really important after you've extracted parts to lay your eyes on each part and do some final editing. Things to watch out for. Make sure you have multi-measure rests. Make sure you have no oversized final measures. Sometimes finale will take the last measure, the last two, or the last three measures and make them really, really wide to fit in the whole staff. You either need to resize that measure with your measure tool, or you need to move it to a different line. So for example, right here, this very first part that popped up, for some reason, it's only showing one measure. This is the fun of finale. You could re-extract all those parts. But for right now, let's just use that measure tool, and we're just going to make that smaller. In an excellent demonstration of why I call this Fun with Finale, my finale program has locked up and it won't let me change the measure size. It's also only generating the first measure for every part. However, let me just show you how to finish off this assignment. So again, once you extract the parts, make sure you edit them. If you have oversized measures, go ahead and select those measures, move them up to the previous system. You can find that under Utilities. You can also typically, unlike what you see here, select the measure tool. It'll give you little editing squares, and you can move that square over to change the width of those measures. Make sure everything else transferred. Be really mindful that your dynamics and your articulation look clean. Look at your parts as you would expect them to look as you have received edited parts. Okay, with all that said, now you need to PDF all of these parts once you've edited them. And you're gonna go one part at a time. So you are going to export to PDF. It'll automatically generate a place to save them. If you want to save them in a different place, that's totally fine. Just make sure you're paying attention. You can even make a new folder, Washington Post March. Make sure that's selected, and then it'll be saved there, and you'll save that. To keep track of all of these many parts, once you have PDF that part, go ahead and minimize it. Not here, that's for finale. You can minimize or even just close it. And that works great because then you're eventually gonna close these one at a time until they're all done and gone. So you'll close that. It'll ask if you want to save changes to the proprietary, the original file, the MUSX. Go ahead and say yes. It'll close it. It'll move to the next part. Do the same thing. Edit it. Make sure everything looks good. Everything's there. Obviously, my finale is having challenges. But if it looks good, you're going to PDF that part. Make sure it saves in the right place. And then close out that part. You're going to do that for every single part. And then you need to upload all of those parts to Canvas. Canvas will only let you attach one file at a time. So this is going to take a little bit of time. I called to see if typically when you can select multiple files and upload them at once. Canvas isn't allowing you to do that. There's nothing I can do to change that, so just mentally prepare that you're going to have to keep attaching files to your submission. Once you have them all attached, go ahead and submit it, and congratulations, you have finished your last finale assignment. Another option is to merge all of these into one file. So let me show you that. I did that really quickly. So File, Score Merger, and we're going to add files. And so you're going to want to find all of those Washington Post files. Select the first one, Shift. Now you've selected all of your Washington Post files. And you're going to merge these files into one file. And there's a few different options down here. You can kind of mess around with these till you get it the way you want it. We're going to merge those. And so it's bringing all those files together. And so what you see here is the score and then all the individual parts. And so that's made it one file. And at this point you could make edits to it, do whatever you need, but your last step would be to export this as a PDF. And there it shows them all merged. And then you have one file that can be uploaded to Canvas. So lots of different ways to do it. That's why we call it Fun with Finale. Hope this helps, and as always, let me know if you have any questions. Good luck!